We have had some technical problems.
Ready to go. I'm ready to go. Ready?
Hit it!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, hello, and thanks for click and play on my Radio Stories podcast. This time around, I want to talk about comedians. I'm a big fan of comedians, comedy in general, have been since I was a little guy sneaking a peek at the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I would always want to watch the comedians. And then whenever there was a comedy special on TV, I would want to check that out. I was a big fan of Jerry Seinfeld in the early 80s, a bunch of other comedians as well. Rodney Dangerfield, of course. There used to be a TV show on Channel 50 out of Detroit called Make Me Laugh. It was hosted by Bobby Van, and he had comedians on there. And I would watch that show, and it was very, very silly. But during my time on the morning show at WRKR in Kalamazoo, which spanned 15 years, we talked to or had in the studio hundreds of comedians during that time. And so I started putting together a quick list of some of my favorites that came into the studio. People like Dom Herrera, Bobcat Goldthwait, Damon Wayans, Robert Schimmel numerous times, Kevin Nealon, Rodney Carrington, Ron White was great, Kevin Meaney. One of our favorites was a female combo team called the Untamed Shrews. They were hilarious. And of course, many comedians would just call in if they weren't in town. One of the worst ever was Andrew Dice Clay. He did not want to play along, even though we were promoting him and his show, and it might have been a TV show we were promoting as well, but he was just not nice and did not want to play the game. And I think we ended the call early because of that. I think we've done Tim Allen on the phone, plenty of others. Gary Fields owned a comedy club in Battle Creek, Michigan for many years, and Gary would advertise on the radio station, and in return, we would have some of his comedians come in to promote that show so more people would know about it and more people would go to the show. That relationship worked very well over the years. I think Gary knew that. Unfortunately, sometimes comedians would come in and knock on our back door at the radio station. We had no idea they were coming. People we had never heard of. We didn't know they were in town. We had no idea. They just kind of showed up every once in a while. So that was uncomfortable a few times. But one of my all-time favorites, and possibly my favorite, Brian Regan, finally came to Gary Fields Comedy Club. Gary, at one point, this was probably early 2000s, came to us and said, listen, if you guys have any comedians you'd like to see me book, give me a list. Tell me who you like, who's somebody you would like to see come, and maybe I'll see what I can do. We did, and he did. And Brian Regan, before he busted out huge, was probably my favorite comedian. And I knew about him from way back in the 80s before he got really, really big. And so Gary said, listen, I'm bringing Brian Regan in. He said, oh my God, he's got to come in on the show, right? And so he did. And it was fun because we actually made Brian laugh. And I think it was legitimate, and I think it was genuine. You can tell when somebody's faking it. We could tell when somebody's faking it. And we could tell when we were faking it. I'm not sure other people could tell when we were faking it, but I'm guessing some could. Anyway, Brian came in, I don't know how long we had him on, probably an hour and a half, 2 hours. I have not listened back to the tape, even though I have it. Some of those things are hard for me to listen to these days. But he came in with a little tape recorder, a little digital recorder, put it down, pushed record, and taped the entire show. And I asked him about it later, and he said, sometimes when you least expect it or don't realize it, some idea comes out, or somebody says something funny, or something that spawns something else will come out, and you'll use it later. And I thought that was great, very organized. And so the time came for his show in Battle Creek at Gary Fields Comedy Club that weekend. And my morning show partners, and I, and my wife as well, went to the show. Very excited. We went backstage to the green room to say hi to Brian real quick. And we had something to eat before the show started. And as we were eating, and my wife hates that I tell this story, my wife got a migraine. My wife gets migraine headaches quite a bit. So we're at Gary Fields Comedy Club, I don't know, half hour before the show is getting ready to start with Brian Regan. my favorite comedian of all time, and she has a migraine. And when a migraine comes on, she has to shut it down right now. She has to get into a dark room, in bed, sleeping, eyes closed, take medication, and just, that's it. So she said, we have to go now. So I gave her the keys, told her to walk out to the car. I ran back to the green room to say goodbye to Brian Regan. I said, Brian, hi, I'm so sorry I'm not going to stay for the show. My wife is sick. We have to go. Thank you so much. Hope to talk to you again. We went home. I missed the Brian Regan show. And every once in a while when I'm squirrely and feel like making my wife mad, I bring up that story. It's all in good fun, of course, but she does still feel kind of bad about that one. But Brian was definitely my favorite comedian, still is. Just a brilliant guy. Doesn't have to work with all the F-bombs and everything, and I think that's one of the things that's special about him, and I'm glad that we got to spend a couple of hours with him one morning, way back in the early 2000s. Well, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. We'll do another podcast soon. Make sure to check out my YouTube channel when you get a minute. You can also find me all over social media, of course. We'll see you next time.